Men, in general, are creatures of observation. There's an undeniable aspect of their nature that involves noticing things around them, and often this propensity for noticing is focused to some degree on the women in their lives or the women they encounter. This doesn't necessarily imply an obsessive fixation, but rather a basic instinctual orientation of attention. It's worth noting here that this behavior, this observation, stems from a deeper, perhaps evolutionary foundation. Men over centuries and millennia have been conditioned, not consciously but biologically, to observe and analyze, to be aware of subtle signals that women emit. It's almost like a survival mechanism. And in some ways, it might even go unnoticed by men themselves, at least in its more primal manifestations. End quote. First and foremost, men are visually oriented. This is not a commentary on their higher intellectual faculties or the depth of their emotional capacity, but rather an observation on the immediate way in which men engage with the world. Vision plays a central role in their daily lives and how they navigate the spaces around them. Look, men will first notice a woman's physical appearance, whether it be her posture, the way she carries herself, the lines of her face, or the way her body moves through a room. It's immediate, it's instinctual. And that instinct doesn't necessarily rest on an intellectual evaluation of beauty or attractiveness, but rather on a basic recognition of physical form. In evolutionary terms, it is rooted in the need to assess the health and reproductive fitness of a potential mate. This doesn't mean that men are exclusively concerned with physical traits in an objectifying way. It's just that this is often the initial realm of awareness. Over time, as relationships deepen, as experiences with women grow more complex, men come to appreciate other qualities: intelligence, kindness, humor, confidence. But the first impression, the first recognition, often operates on a very different level. This first glance, this initial noticing, isn't about understanding a woman as a complex individual. It's not about dissecting her personality or her values or her interests. It's about recognizing a person's physical presence and what that might represent on a more instinctual, biological plane. Why is this so? Why do men seem to be more attuned to this physical presence in women? To answer that, one must consider the evolutionary pressures that have shaped the way both men and women perceive one another. Men historically have been hunters, and they needed to be able to quickly assess potential threats, potential mates, and potential allies. The ability to assess the visual cues of a woman, her age, her health, her fertility, was vital to the continuation of the species. Over time, these instincts became ingrained. They are not consciously invoked, and in many ways they are subconscious and automatic. Men notice a woman's physicality not because they have been taught to do so, but because it is deeply embedded in their biology. At the same time, this does not mean that men are purely reductionist in their evaluation of women. Far from it. While initial attention may be drawn to physical appearance, men also have the capacity for deeper engagement. The observation of physical form eventually gives way to a more nuanced understanding. In fact, many men become increasingly aware of the subtleties that are not immediately visible, things like the shape of a woman's character, the richness of her thoughts, and the complexity of her emotional landscape. And here is where the tension lies. Men will often find themselves caught between these initial visual assessments and a deeper understanding that goes beyond mere surface appearances. Yet, despite this potential for deeper engagement, the initial instinct to notice physical traits remains ever present. Men will often find themselves drawn to features that signify fertility and health: symmetry of the face, clear skin, the curves of the body. These are the traits that signal a woman's capacity to reproduce and perpetuate the species. And while it is a vast simplification to say that men are only ever driven by reproductive instincts, it is nonetheless an undeniable part of the equation. These visual cues are powerful and they impact a man's attention in ways that cannot be easily dismissed. Men also tend to notice the way women present themselves. There is something about the deliberate act of a woman choosing her clothing, the way she adorns herself, that signals her own self-perception and how she wishes to be perceived. This is no small thing. The choices a woman makes about her appearance speak volumes about her sense of identity, her desires, her intentions. Men will observe these choices, often on a subconscious level, and from those choices they will form impressions. Does she dress in a way that suggests confidence, independence, or vulnerability? Is she presenting herself to the world in a way that invites interaction, or is she signaling distance and privacy? These cues matter because they communicate far more than words could. Furthermore, men notice how women move through the world. This isn't limited to physical traits alone, but extends to body language and nonverbal cues. A woman's posture, her gait, the way she interacts with the environment around her, all contribute to the picture that a man forms in his mind. If she walks with a sense of purpose, if she carries herself with self-assurance, these are things that do not go unnoticed. A woman who seems confident in her own skin, who appears to have command over her own movements, can captivate attention in a way that someone who is unsure of themselves may not. End quote. But let's not forget the subtler elements. The scent of a woman, the sound of her voice, the way she speaks to those around her, how she makes eye contact, and the rhythm of her speech. These are not overtly sexual cues, but they are cues nonetheless. They are an invitation to further understanding, to deeper engagement. Men will notice these things. They will notice whether a woman's presence is warm, inviting, or distant, closed off. These tiny details, imperceptible at times to the conscious mind, often have a profound impact on the way men interact with women. It's about a dance of signals, of energy, of presence. And this dance is more than just physical. It is emotional, intellectual, and psychological. Now, it must be stated clearly that while men are highly observant of women in these ways, this does not mean that all men are driven solely by these surface-level cues. Many men, especially those who are more mature or who have developed a higher degree of self-awareness, can look beyond the surface to the depths of a woman's character. The initial glance may be about the physical, but the deeper engagement is about the emotional, the intellectual, and the spiritual. The complexity of human relationships allows for much more than mere physical attraction. It allows for connection at every level, from the mental to the emotional to the spiritual. But there is still an undeniable truth. Men, in their observations of women, tend to be more attuned to certain physical traits first. The reason for this is not one of moral failing or inherent shallowness, but one of biological inheritance and evolutionary conditioning. It's a matter of instinctual attention, shaped by millions of years of history. And while culture, society, and personal growth can certainly shift how men view and relate to women, there is an enduring nature to these early reactions. The way men notice women can also be affected by the context in which they encounter them. When a man is in a social setting, at a party, at a work event, or at a social gathering, his attention will often be drawn to those women who are most prominent in their appearance. He will register their energy, their presence, and their aura. It's not merely a matter of physicality, it's a matter of how that physicality interacts with the broader context of social dynamics. A woman who is standing apart from the crowd, who is engaging others with her body language and her facial expressions, will often draw the attention of those around her, including men. In this case, the noticeability of her presence comes not only from her physical traits, but from the way she commands attention, the way she makes herself known. This interplay of visual and social cues creates a dynamic of observation that is complex and layered. It's crucial to understand that this tendency to notice women's physical traits is not inherently negative or objectifying. It is simply a reflection of a natural process, one that exists in both men and women, albeit in different forms. Women too notice physical traits in men, though perhaps not with the same immediacy or intensity. But the process of noticing is universal. It's just that men and women often focus on different aspects of the other. Women may notice the way a man carries himself, his emotional intelligence, or his kindness, while men may notice the more immediate and visible aspects such as physical appearance. This is not a criticism of one way or the other, it's merely an observation of human nature. As men become more conscious of their instincts, as they grow in self-awareness, they may find that their attention shifts. The first glance, the immediate noticing of physical traits, may give way to deeper and more meaningful recognition. This is not always the case, of course. Many men remain focused primarily on the surface, and there are women who place a premium on physical beauty above all else. But for many, the initial noticing is a starting point, a way into a deeper connection, one that encompasses the full range of what it means to be human. The emotional, the intellectual, the physical, and the spiritual. Men are biologically wired to notice women's physical appearance first, driven by evolutionary instincts to assess health, fertility, and reproductive fitness. This instinctual attention is often subconscious and rooted in the need for survival and mate selection. While the initial focus may be on physical appearance, men are capable of developing a deeper understanding of a woman's character, personality, and emotional complexity over time. The first impression serves as an entry point to a more profound connection that goes beyond physical traits. Men's perceptions and attention are also influenced by the context in which they encounter women, such as social or professional settings. The way a woman presents herself through body language, clothing, and behavior shapes how men engage with her, often adding layers of meaning to the initial visual impressions. Yet with many men, regardless of previous belief systems, men, in a broad and often generalized sense, possess a natural instinctual orientation toward noticing physical traits in women. This inclination isn't just a product of modern societal dynamics, but is deeply ingrained in our evolutionary history. Understanding why men first direct their attention toward a woman's physical appearance requires examining this natural instinct through the lens of evolutionary biology, psychology, and even social conditioning. While it might seem like a superficial or objectifying trait, this tendency is more complex, deeply rooted in survival, reproduction, and ultimately, the perpetuation of the species. The human species, like all living organisms, has evolved through processes that prioritize survival and reproduction. These fundamental imperatives have shaped behaviors and patterns that, even in contemporary society, continue to affect how men and women interact. Men's tendency to focus on physical characteristics, especially those that are often tied to fertility and health, can be traced back to our ancient ancestors, who had to make rapid assessments about potential mates, threats, and allies. The sheer act of survival in early human history necessitated that men develop the ability to quickly identify visual cues that could signal the reproductive fitness of women. Such cues were not arbitrary. They were indicators that signaled a woman's age, health, and ability to successfully carry and raise children. This form of visual perception was essential in environments where mates needed to be chosen quickly. The faster men could recognize a woman's fertility, health, and overall condition, the better their chances of ensuring their genetic legacy. Evolution doesn't care for the deeper complexities of love or human connection in the way that modern cultural narratives often romanticize. Evolution is concerned with reproduction and survival. For this reason, men became biologically conditioned to notice specific markers in a woman's appearance that indicated reproductive viability. These visual signals, while still a part of human psychology, have persisted well into modern times, even though society and culture have evolved significantly beyond these primal imperatives. The most obvious of these physical traits are those associated with youth and fertility: the shape of a woman's body, the clarity of her skin, the fullness of her lips, the symmetry of her facial features. All of these are instinctively processed by men as markers of reproductive potential. Symmetry, for example, is often cited as a sign of good health and genetic fitness. A symmetrical face and body are indicators that a person's developmental processes were healthy and unhindered by disease or genetic mutation. This preference for symmetry can be traced back to the fact that individuals with more symmetrical features were more likely to survive and reproduce in early human societies. It was these markers that helped men decide instinctively whether a woman would be a suitable mate for reproduction. Similarly, skin clarity and smoothness signal youthfulness and fertility. Youth is a primary indicator of reproductive potential. Younger women are capable of having more children, which was crucial for the propagation of the human race in earlier times. Today, while youth might not be the only measure of attractiveness or desirability, it is still one of the first physical traits that captures attention. The smoothness and clarity of the skin represent a lack of illness or genetic problems. A woman with healthy, clear skin is, in an evolutionary sense, signaling that she is in peak reproductive health. Beyond youth, body shape has long been another key indicator of a woman's reproductive fitness. Certain body types, particularly those with a pronounced waist-to-hip ratio, are commonly associated with higher fertility. The curvy body, especially with a waist-to-hip ratio of about 0.7, is subconsciously recognized by men as a signal of fertility and overall health. This specific ratio, which often signifies a woman's ability to carry a pregnancy and give birth, has been linked to a higher probability of successful reproduction. This isn't to say that all men are consciously aware of this connection or that it defines their entire perception of women, but this attraction is deeply rooted in biology. Even without conscious knowledge of the underlying reasons, men are drawn to physical forms that suggest fertility. The perception of physical traits in women extends beyond these biological markers to encompass the broader concept of health and vitality. Men, at an instinctual level, are drawn to physical traits that signal a woman's ability to contribute to the survival and success of offspring. This might include certain facial features, body movements, and even the tone of voice. It's not just about appearance, but also how a person's physical presentation reflects overall health. A woman who walks confidently with an open posture and a vibrant energy might also subconsciously signal a more fertile and healthy state. The way she interacts with her environment, the way she holds herself, may be just as important as any specific feature. These nonverbal cues can reflect her general well-being, and men pick up on them, often without fully realizing the reasons why. Another layer of understanding this instinctual focus on physical appearance in women lies in the concept of mate selection. In the evolutionary context, men are driven to reproduce with women who provide the best chance for producing healthy offspring. This was historically achieved by selecting mates based on physical cues, as these cues often indicated good health, genetic robustness, and fertility. However, this biological imperative doesn't mean that men's interactions with women are driven solely by these superficial factors. It is crucial to acknowledge that while men may first notice physical traits, their capacity to form deeper connections and attachments often involves a broader appreciation of emotional intelligence, compatibility, and shared values. This is important acknowledgement of shared values and shared values. In other words, men might initially notice physical traits because they signal certain biological truths, but over time, deeper bonds are formed based on emotional and intellectual connections. Despite the complexity of human relationships, the fact remains that men are wired to notice physical traits first because of the primal need to assess reproductive fitness. This doesn't imply that men are incapable of appreciating other aspects of a woman, but rather that the first thing that draws their attention is often her physical form. This is simply a product of the way our minds have evolved. It's part of the human experience and is not necessarily indicative of objectification or disrespect. However, it is also important to note that men's focus on physical traits is not always conscious or overt. Much of it is subconscious, an automatic response shaped by millions of years of evolution. This means that a man's first reaction to a woman's appearance, whether it's a fleeting glance or a lingering look, isn't something he necessarily controls. These reactions are part of the evolutionary programming that dictates how men perceive and evaluate potential mates. In the modern world, this response may be filtered through cultural norms, personal values, and individual preferences, but the fundamental instinct to notice physical traits remains. Interestingly, the instinctual focus on physical traits is not limited to men alone. Women also have a keen awareness of men's physical appearance. However, their focus tends to be different. Whereas men might focus initially on physical traits that indicate fertility, women often focus on traits that suggest stability, resourcefulness, and the ability to protect and care for offspring. Women may be more attuned to a man's facial expressions, body language, or overall confidence, which signals emotional maturity, the ability to provide, and the capacity for nurturing. Men, in turn, tend to focus more on the physical signals of fertility and health because that has been historically the greater indicator of reproductive success. The difference in what men and women notice isn't based on a deficit of emotional intelligence or awareness, but on evolutionary pressures that shape each sex's reproductive strategies. While society often tries to cultivate deeper, more nuanced connections, it's important to remember that these primal instincts are not easily overridden. Human nature is a complex interplay of both learned behaviors and instinctual drives. Men are not simply visual creatures devoid of emotional intelligence or capacity for deeper connection, but the biology behind their initial attention to women's physical traits cannot be ignored. This instinctual response may influence the way they interact with women, but it doesn't solely define their perceptions or behaviors in their relationships. The influence of modern society has undoubtedly affected how men relate to women's physical appearance. In a world where media often places undue emphasis on certain standards of beauty, the instinctual attention men give to physical traits can sometimes be exaggerated or distorted. The pressure to conform to these standards may heighten men's attention to appearance, making it seem as though men value physical traits more than other aspects of a person. However, beneath this social conditioning lies the evolutionary truth. Men are naturally inclined to notice physical characteristics first, particularly those that signal health, youth, and fertility. This is not to say that the emphasis on physical appearance is the sole determinant of attraction. Many men are capable of forming strong emotional bonds based on shared experiences, intellectual connection, and mutual respect. These qualities may eventually eclipse the initial focus on physical traits. However, the instinctual attention to appearance, rooted in biology, will always be a part of human interaction, particularly in the early stages of attraction. At its core, the instinctual attention men pay to physical traits in women is not an inherently negative or objectifying quality. It is instead a deeply embedded part of human nature. This behavior serves as a starting point, a way for men to assess potential mates and engage with the world around them. Over time, as relationships deepen, men have the capacity to look beyond the surface and appreciate the fullness of a person. But this initial response, driven by biology, is a key element of the complex dynamics between men and women. It's important to recognize this instinctual tendency for what it is, a natural part of human evolution, which continues to shape how men experience attraction today. While the initial attention that men direct toward women is often tied to physical traits, it is crucial to understand that this is merely the beginning of a much deeper process of interaction and attraction. The instinctual focus on physical appearance, while rooted in evolutionary psychology, gives way to a more nuanced, intricate understanding of a person as men engage with women beyond the surface level. What begins as an evaluation based on visual signals evolves into a deeper and more profound connection, one that encompasses emotional, intellectual, and spiritual dimensions. In this way, men's perceptions of women are not confined to mere physical appearances. Over time, their attention often shifts toward a more holistic appreciation of who a woman is as a person and what makes her unique and valuable. In this way, men search deeper within themselves to learn about their lovers, rivals, siblings, and whatever else is front of inclusion. This process of moving beyond the surface is complex and involves an evolving shift from biological and instinctual responses to more thoughtful and meaningful engagements. Men may initially be drawn to a woman because of her physical traits, but as they interact with her, as they listen to her speak, witness her actions, and share in experiences, they begin to perceive her on a much deeper level. The journey of attraction and connection transcends the immediate, visible cues and moves into a space where intellectual compatibility, emotional intelligence, and shared values play a pivotal role in forming lasting bonds. It is here that the true nature of attraction begins to unfold, far beyond the superficial and into the realm of meaningful connection. The recognition of a woman's character and inner qualities begins when men observe her actions, her words, and the way she engages with the world. Cultural and contextual influences play a significant role in shaping how men perceive and respond to women. While the basic biological and evolutionary tendencies that guide initial attraction remain a key part of the equation, the broader societal, cultural, and contextual factors determine how those instincts are expressed, refined, and understood. In modern society, the way men notice and engage with women is profoundly influenced by the cultural narratives they are exposed to, the social settings in which they interact, and the evolving expectations of gender roles and relationships. These external influences, both subtle and overt, have a profound impact on the dynamics of attraction and interaction between men and women. At the heart of this is the culture in which individuals are raised. Each culture carries its own set of norms, values, and ideals regarding beauty, attraction, and relationships. What one culture deems attractive or desirable may be quite different from what another culture holds as the ideal. Cultural standards of beauty, for example, vary widely across different societies. While Western culture tends to idealize slim, tall, and youthful appearances, other cultures may celebrate fuller body types or place greater emphasis on a woman's strength or character rather than her physical appearance. The standards of beauty and attractiveness that are promoted in a given society can significantly affect how men perceive women, influencing their first impressions and overall attraction. Men are often conditioned by the cultural context they live in to value certain physical traits over others. In addition to physical appearance, cultural narratives surrounding gender roles also influence how men view and relate to women. Traditional gender rules, which have been deeply embedded in many societies for centuries, often prescribe particular expectations of men and women. In many cultures, men have historically been seen as the protectors and providers, while women have been expected to take on more domestic nurturing roles. These gender norms shape not only how men are taught to perceive women, but also how women are taught to present themselves. In some societies, women may feel pressure to adhere to these roles and present themselves in ways that are consistent with traditional expectations of femininity, modesty, or beauty. In these settings, men's attention to women may not be purely instinctual or individual, but also shaped by what they have been taught is attractive, acceptable, or desirable. Cultural and contextual influences also impact the way men and women interact in different social environments. For instance, the way men notice women in a professional setting might differ significantly from the way they engage with women in a more casual or intimate context. Social norms around professionalism, appropriate behavior, and interpersonal dynamics in the workplace shape how men perceive women in these settings. In a professional environment, men may be more likely to suppress their natural instincts or initial focus on physical traits in favor of focusing on the woman's competence, intelligence, and professional abilities. Social pressures, codes of conduct, and awareness of power dynamics in these settings might lead men to approach interactions with women more cautiously, aware of the potential consequences of objectifying behavior or inappropriate advances. But this context shifts the focus away from physical attraction to a greater emphasis on shared professional goals and mutual respect. Attachment does not mean exclusive commitment. In contrast, in a casual or social setting, such as a party or gathering, men may feel freer to express their attraction based on physical appearance and other superficial traits. These settings, where the focus is often on entertainment, socializing, and relaxation, offer different cultural cues that guide men's behavior. The pressure to conform to professional expectations is absent, and there may be a greater focus on romantic or sexual attraction. Here, men may be more likely to pay attention to the visible traits that indicate health, vitality, and reproductive fitness, as these traits are more openly associated with attraction and sexual potential in these contexts. In these environments, the cultural context provides less of a filter for natural instincts, allowing men to engage with women in a way that may feel more immediate and instinctual. Moreover, cultural representations of gender and attraction in media and popular culture further shape how men approach women. The portrayal of women in movies, television shows, advertisements, and social media platforms often dictates what is considered attractive, desirable, or ideal. From a young age, men are exposed to these media depictions, which often emphasize certain physical features, such as facial symmetry, body shape, and youth, as the standard of beauty. These portrayals contribute to the formation of cultural norms and standards of attraction that men internalize over time. Advertisements and movies may reinforce certain images of women that align with specific ideals of beauty, often sidelining or omitting other aspects of womanhood that are less visually oriented. As a result, men may begin to associate attractiveness primarily with the physical traits they see consistently portrayed in the media, which further influences their natural instincts. And this is why the lawsuit goes on to say, quote, "The rise of social media in recent years has also dramatically reshaped cultural expectations around beauty and attraction. Platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook have become central in defining what is considered fashionable, stylish, and beautiful. The constant sharing of curated images has heightened the emphasis on physical appearance, with women often presenting highly edited or idealized versions of themselves. Men, in turn, are exposed to a narrow set of beauty standards that emphasize certain body types, skin tones, and facial features. These digital spaces have created a hyper-visual culture where men are bombarded with images of women that may lead them to focus even more on physical traits. The pressures of online validation, likes, and comments also contribute to how men assess and engage with women, often encouraging them to value outward appearance over other deeper qualities. Social media platforms reinforce the idea that physical attractiveness is paramount and can overshadow other important dimensions of attraction, such as personality, intelligence, and emotional depth. However, as much as culture shapes initial perceptions of women, contextual factors in specific interactions provide an additional layer of complexity in how men notice and engage with women. Context is essential in determining what qualities are emphasized in any given interaction. For example, when men interact with women in settings where mutual respect and equality are prioritized, such as progressive and gender-sensitive environments, there may be a greater focus on intellectual compatibility, shared values, and emotional connection rather than physical appearance. In these contexts, men are often more attuned to a woman's personality, her contributions to discussions, and her capacity for empathy and understanding. The context of these environments encourages a shift in focus, guiding men to notice and appreciate qualities beyond the surface. On the other hand, in environments that are more competitive or where traditional gender rules are more entrenched, men may feel more pressure to conform to cultural expectations of masculinity and attraction. In these contexts, the focus may remain more heavily on physical traits, as men attempt to assert their own status or gain validation from others. Social settings, such as bars or clubs, where there is often an emphasis on casual interaction and sexual attraction, may prompt men to notice women's bodies, looks, and other visual markers of fertility and youth. The social context shapes how men approach these interactions, often reinforcing instinctual responses to women's physical appearance. Another important contextual influence is the nature of the relationship between the individuals involved. Men's perceptions of women can shift dramatically depending on whether the interaction is casual, friendly, romantic, or familial. In romantic relationships, men may pay more attention to their partner's physical appearance at first, but as the relationship deepens, they begin to notice a wider range of qualities that contribute to long-term compatibility and emotional fulfillment. And in these situations, the cultural and contextual influences might shift from an emphasis on physical attraction to an appreciation of emotional support, shared values, and intellectual connection. Over time, the focus transitions from external characteristics to more enduring qualities that form the foundation of a strong and lasting partnership. The family environment also plays a significant role in shaping how men perceive and interact with women. Men raised in families with certain expectations of femininity or gender roles may carry these values into their adult interactions. For example, men who grow up in traditional households where women are primarily valued for their role as mothers and caretakers may place more importance on domestic qualities when interacting with women. Conversely, men who grow up in more progressive or egalitarian households may be more inclined to view women as equals, focusing on traits such as ambition, intellect, and independence. The familial context influences how men understand and appreciate women, and these early influences can have a lasting impact on their perceptions of women throughout their lives. The impact of cultural and contextual influences extends to the way men and women perceive each other within specific social structures, such as the workplace, educational settings, or in activism and social movements. In these environments, women's professional achievements, leadership qualities, and intellectual capabilities may take precedence over physical traits, reshaping men's focus toward women's talents, expertise, and contributions. In spaces that emphasize equality, respect, and mutual empowerment, men's perceptions evolve to see women not just as individuals with physical attributes, but as full, multidimensional people with skills, experiences, and voices that contribute meaningfully to the larger collective. Ultimately, men's attention to women cannot be understood solely through the lens of biological instincts or physical traits alone. Cultural and contextual factors intricately shape how men view, interact with, and engage with women. These influences mold their perceptions of attraction, dictating the qualities that are prioritized and celebrated in any given interaction. Social, cultural, and environmental contexts provide the frameworks in which men's innate tendencies are refined and expressed, affecting how they notice and appreciate women in various aspects of life. While physical traits may draw initial attention, the cultural, social, and contextual backdrop is what helps shape deeper, more nuanced understandings of attraction, connection, and human relationships. The broader cultural and contextual influences ultimately guide men toward a fuller, richer experience of women, moving beyond the surface to a more comprehensive appreciation of their complexity and depth. Fuller and longer perspectives offers more indirect exploration of our inner experiences and motivations, while promoting further integration of these complexity and depth